Exploring the life of Anne Boleyn, a guide to visiting the most important places in her life. Step back in time and explore the fascinating life of one of history's most intriguing women, Anne Boleyn, by visiting the very places that shaped her story. This video will answer, who was Anne Boleyn and why is she so famous? Anne Boleyn is one of the most famous figures in English history. She was the second wife of King Henry VIII and Queen of England from 1533 to 1536. She is remembered for her influence in the English Reformation, her role in establishing the Church of England, and her tragic end at the hands of her husband. Her story has been told through books, films, plays, and artworks over centuries, making her one of the most recognizable figures from Tudor England. The most important places to visit to follow Anne Boleyn's life. Anne Boleyn was one of the most influential figures in English history. Her life had a profound impact on the country's political and religious landscape. To understand her story, it is important to visit the places that were significant during her lifetime. Hever Castle, Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace and Greenwich Palace are some of the most important places to visit to follow Anne Boleyn's life. Hever Castle was where Anne lived as a child and later became her home when she married Henry VIII. The Tower of London is where she was imprisoned before being executed for treason. Hampton Court Palace was where Henry VIII courted her, while Greenwich Palace is where they celebrated their wedding in 1533. Visiting these places will help you understand more about Anne Boleyn's life and legacy. What you can learn from visiting these sites. If you're interested in learning more about Anne Boleyn and Tudor history, then visiting these sites is a great way to do so. From exploring the life of Anne Boleyn to discovering the history of the Tudors, you can get an in-depth look at this fascinating period in time. Whether you're a student or just curious about this era, there's something for everyone on these sites. So why not take a trip back in time and learn more about Anne Boleyn and Tudor history? Take a journey through time and explore the fascinating life of Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was an important figure in the Tudor period of English history, and there are several places in England where tourists can visit to follow her life. Here are some suggestions, and please, we would like to hear from you. Number 1. Hever Castle. This is where Anne Boleyn grew up and it's located in Kent, southeast England. The castle is now a museum with exhibitions about Anne Boleyn's life and the Tudor period. $2. The Tower of London. This is where Anne Boleyn was imprisoned before her execution. Visitors can see the room where she was held and learn about her final days. Number 3. Hampton Court Palace. This was one of King Henry VIII's favorite palaces, and it's where he and Anne Boleyn stayed during their courtship. Visitors can see the rooms where they stayed and learn about their relationship. Number 4. St. Peter Advincula Chapel. This is located within the grounds of the Tower of London, and it's where Anne Boleyn and other famous prisoners were buried. Visitors can see her grave and learn about her execution. Number 5. Greenwich. Anne Boleyn was born in Norfolk, but her family owned a house in Greenwich. Visitors can see the house, which is now part of the Royal Naval College, and learn about her early life. Number 6. Blickling Hall. This is a stately home in Norfolk that is said to be haunted by the ghost of Anne Boleyn. Visitors can take a tour of the house and learn about its history. Number 7. The Anne Boleyn Experience at the Tudor World Museum in Stratford-upon-Avon. This museum offers an interactive experience that takes visitors through Anne Boleyn's life, from her childhood to her execution. It's a great option for those who want to learn about her life in a fun and engaging way. Tips for planning your trip and making the most out of the places to visit to follow Anne Boleyn's life. If you are looking for an exciting and unique way to explore England, why not follow in the footsteps of Anne Boleyn? From her childhood home to the Tower of London, there are many places that you can visit to learn more about this iconic figure. Here are some tips for planning your trip and making the most out of the places to visit to follow Anne Boleyn's life. 10 tips for planning your trip and making the most out of the places to visit and follow Anne Boleyn's life. Number 1. Do your research beforehand. Look up the places you want to visit, opening times, ticket prices, etc. to avoid any surprises. Number 2. Plan your itinerary. Decide which places you want to visit and in what order. This will help you make the most of your time. Number 3. Book in advance. Some places may require advance booking, so make sure to check and book ahead of time. Number 4. Consider a guided tour. A guided tour can be a great way to learn more about Anne Boleyn's life and the places you're visiting. Number 5. Dress appropriately. Some places, like churches and chapels, may require visitors to dress modestly. Be sure to check beforehand and dress appropriately. Number 6. Bring a camera. You'll want to capture memories of your trip, so be sure to bring a camera or smartphone to take photos. Number 7. Bring comfortable shoes. You'll be doing a lot of walking, so make sure to wear comfortable shoes. Number 8. Bring a map. A map can be helpful for navigating unfamiliar areas and finding your way around. Number 9. Be respectful. Remember that the places you're visiting may hold religious or historical significance, so be respectful when visiting. Number 10. Take your time. Don't rush through the places you're visiting. Take your time to appreciate the history and beauty of each location. By following these tips, you can make the most out of your trip and gain a deeper understanding of Anne Boleyn's life and legacy. Stay for the next half of Anne Boleyn's life in chronological order. Whether you're interested in her early life, her relationship with King Henry VIII, or her tragic end, there's something for everyone. Embark on a journey through the life and legacy of Anne Boleyn by retracing her footsteps and discovering the places that were most significant to her. If you're a history buff or simply fascinated by the Tudor era, then exploring the life of Anne Boleyn through the places she lived and visited is a must-do experience. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Then you'll be a part of my community. The life of Anne Boleyn, Queen of England. The second wife of Henry VIII. Key events in the life of Anne Boleyn. Anne is born in either the 1501 or 1507, although the exact date of her birth is uncertain. Most historians believe she was born in 1501. Her birthplace is believed to be Blickling Hall in Norfolk, England, and she was most likely born around the year 1501. Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard were her parents and gained titles of Earl of Wiltshire and Ormond and Duke of Norfolk. Anne was the second of their 3 children, with an older sister named Mary and a younger brother named George. There is no clear consensus on whether Anne Boleyn had a happy childhood or not. Some historians suggest that she had a privileged upbringing in her father's household, where she was educated in languages, music, and dance. She also spent time at the court of Margaret of Austria, where she was exposed to the culture and politics of Europe. However, others argue that Anne's childhood was marked by instability and uncertainty. Her mother died when she was young, and her father's career was subject to the whims of the Tudor monarchs. Moreover, Anne's family was not always in favor with the royal court. Despite these challenges, Anne's intelligence and charm helped her to navigate the complex world of court politics and ultimately become Queen of England. 1514 to 1519, and serves as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Claude of France. It is not entirely clear who arranged for Anne Boleyn to become a lady-in-waiting to Queen Claude of France, but it is believed that her father, Thomas Boleyn, played a key role in securing the position. Thomas was a diplomat and courtier who had close ties to the royal court, and he likely used his connections to arrange for Anne's placement. Some historians have also suggested that Anne's sister Mary, who was already serving as a lady-in-waiting, may have recommended her for the position. Regardless of how she obtained the position, serving as a lady-in-waiting in the French court. And it was a significant opportunity for Anne to gain exposure to the culture and politics of Europe, which would later play a role in her life at the English court. Anne serves as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's sister. There is not enough historical evidence to suggest that Anne Boleyn served as a lady-in-waiting to Mary Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII. There have been rumors and speculation that Mary had an affair with Henry VIII before he became involved with Anne, but there is no concrete evidence to support these claims. Mary was rumored to have been a mistress of the French king, Francis I, and it is possible that she may have had affairs with other prominent men at court, but there is no evidence to suggest that she had a romantic relationship with Henry VIII. It is important to note that many rumors and myths have surrounded the Tudor court, and it can be difficult to separate fact from fiction. 1522, she returned to England in 1522 to serve as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII. 1525, and returns to England and catches the attention of Henry VIII. They begin a romantic relationship. There is no solid historical evidence to suggest that Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn began an affair as soon as she started serving as a lady-in-waiting to his wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon. Although it is known that Henry was attracted to Anne and pursued her for many years before their marriage, there is no record of a romantic relationship between them until several years after Anne's return to England in 1522. It is believed that Anne initially resisted Henry's advances, and it was only after several years of courtship that she finally agreed to become his mistress. Even then, their relationship was kept secret and discreet, as Henry was still married to Catherine and divorce was not yet a viable option for him. It was only after years of political maneuvering and legal battles that Henry was able to annul his marriage to Catherine and marry Anne in 1533. So, while Henry and Anne did eventually have a romantic relationship, it did not begin immediately upon her arrival at court as a lady-in-waiting. 1533, Anne secretly marries Henry VIII, and she is crowned Queen of England on June 1, following Henry's annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. September 7, 1533, Anne gives birth to her only surviving child, Elizabeth, who would later become Queen Elizabeth I. Yes, Anne Boleyn did give birth to a son, who would later become the future King Edward VI. Anne's pregnancy was announced in the summer of 1533, shortly after her marriage to Henry VIII was declared valid by the Archbishop of Canterbury. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy on October 12, 1537, at Hampton Court Palace. The birth of a son was a great relief and joy to Henry, who had been hoping for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. However, Anne's joy was short-lived, as she was accused of adultery and treason just a few months later and was executed on May 19, 1536. Edward was just 2.5 years old at the time of his mother's death, and was raised by his stepmother, Jane Seymour, who had given birth to Henry's next son, Prince Edward. May 2, 1536, Anne Boleyn was accused of adultery, incest, and treason on May 2, 1536. Anne Boleyn is arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. The charges were brought against her by Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's chief minister, who was instrumental in orchestrating her downfall. The accusations were based on the testimonies of several men, including Mark Smeaton, a musician at court, and Anne's own brother, George Boleyn. The charges were also supported by the testimony of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, who were questioned about her conduct and behavior. Anne vehemently denied the charges, but she was found guilty in a trial that lasted just 2 days. Anne falls out of favor with Henry VIII, and a series of events leads to her downfall. She is accused of adultery, incest, and treason. May 19, 1536, Anne is tried and found guilty of the charges against her. She was sentenced to death and was executed just 17 days after the charges were first brought against her. May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn is executed by beheading at the Tower of London. After her death, Anne's marriage to Henry VIII is declared null and void, and their daughter Elizabeth is declared illegitimate. After Anne Boleyn was executed for treason, her father, Thomas Boleyn, and her brother, George Boleyn, were both arrested and sent to the Tower of London. They were accused of participating in Anne's alleged crimes and were put on trial. Thomas Boleyn. Her father was eventually released and allowed to retire from court, but he was stripped of his title and his lands. George Boleyn, her brother, however, was found guilty of treason and was executed alongside Anne. Anne's mother, Elizabeth Boleyn, and her other siblings, Mary and Henry, were not implicated in the charges against Anne and were not punished. However, their reputation was tarnished by association, and they were excluded from court life and the royal family's favor. Anne Boleyn's downfall had a significant impact on her family, causing them to lose status and influence at court. It also marked a turning point in the reign of Henry VIII, as it paved the way for his subsequent marriages and divorces, which would redefine the religious and political landscape of England. 1940, Thomas Cromwell was one of the chief architects of Anne Boleyn's downfall, and he continued to serve as the chief minister and advisor to King Henry VIII after her execution. He played a key role in the king's divorce from Catherine of Aragon and his subsequent marriage to Jane Seymour. Cromwell was instrumental in promoting the English Reformation and was responsible for dissolving the monasteries and confiscating their lands, which helped to increase the king's wealth and power. Despite his many successes, Cromwell's fortunes began to turn in the mid-1540s. He faced increasing opposition from conservative factions at court and was blamed for the king's disastrous marriage to Anne of Cleves. Cromwell was eventually arrested on charges of treason and heresy in 1540, and he was executed on Tower Hill on July 28 of that year. His fall from grace was sudden and swift, and it marked the end of an era in English politics. Elizabeth I, however, later becomes one of the most famous monarchs in English history. This chronological timeline provides a condensed overview of Anne Boleyn's life, focusing on the most significant events. Her marriage and subsequent downfall had far-reaching consequences for English history and the establishment of the Church of England. Please subscribe and like this video.